Age of Dogfights World War II. This is obviously the sequel to Age of Dogfights World War I, which I reviewed back in the day, and maybe because of that, the publisher asked me if I was interested in taking an early look at the demo edition of their sequel, of the World War II version. So the game is very similar to the original game. The emphasis is still on dogfighting, scenario-based, individual aircraft for which you will track fuel and burst of ammo and bomb loads, and very promising idea. Now, the game is not out yet. This is a demo edition. It will be on Kickstarter soon, or I believe maybe it is on Kickstarter already. And there are a couple of caveats here. First, this is an unpaid overview. I never ask for money to make my videos. If a publisher says, hey, do you want to take an early look? And the game seems interesting, I say yes. And then I play the game and I share my opinions in a video. The other caveat here, though, is that I haven't really played this game. What? And the publisher told me right away up front that this demo edition is pretty undercooked yet. It's still not really close to what it will be when the game is finished, including the fact that there is no rule book. The publisher has said, hey, look, use the old rule book and get a sense of how this new game works, and then they sent me a separate document with the major changes between the first edition and this one. And also, there are no scenarios whatsoever. So what did I do? Full disclosure, I reread the old manual, I read the document with the changes between this edition and the old one, and then I set up a couple of airplanes and I played a couple of turns because there are no scenarios. So I'm just gonna give you a sense of what the main differences between this edition and the previous version of the game are, and I hope that this will give you a sense of what to expect and maybe get a sense of whether or not this is a project that you want to back on Kickstarter. So the general idea remains the same, that we have individual aircraft represented by these tokens that stay on stands, and they really give you the illusion that they're floating in the air. There is a label on each stand that tells you the level, which means the altitude at which the aircraft is flying, and when you are flying at a different altitude because you're going up or down, then you simply switch that with a different stand. It's still cool that you can place these to indicate if you finish a turn going down or climbing up. Fun stuff. You even have stands with a slanted top to indicate if you ended a turn turning in a certain direction. It looks really neat. There's also a reminder that the last move on my last turn, the aircraft was turning that way, so I cannot right away go against the physics and go there just because I split the movement between two turns. Physics don't care about that, so I need to go straight or to turn in the same direction that I was going. Speaking about these levels, a absolutely major difference between editions here is that now we have 13 levels. That's a lot of levels, and I have to tell you, I don't have a good feeling about this because 13 levels means a lot of these stands. In this demo edition, I don't know how many they will have in the final edition. There are maybe, I don't know, 8, 9, 10 stands for each, and it's already a pain to separate them and to organize them. And then of those 8 or 9 or 10 that there is some are these slanted ones. So basically that means that if now I wanted to have a scenario where you have 5 aircraft flying a level 8 coming from here and 5 it's dogfighting, so they want to cast them flying at the same level, I can't really do it. There just aren't enough stands. And the publisher, I contacted the publisher by email and said, yeah, use a different stand, made a note, fake it with another stand. But really, that's not ideal to me. And frankly, again, even if the final design will come with 20 stands for each level, so I can really have the kind of tactical flexibility that I like, then it's going to be again a huge pain to keep these 13 levels, these clusters, these bunches of stands of 13 levels separated from one another. And I just don't see personally the necessity of 13 levels of altitude. in a dogfighting game where ultimately I'm trying to go. I can't imagine wanting, okay, I'm trying to dodge, so I want to be 5 levels from you. Well, if you drop down by a number of levels, I'm going to follow you. So ultimately, the reality is that in every dogfighting game that I've ever seen, aircraft are usually not more than 2-3 levels from one another. Doesn't matter how many unused levels there are, because there's this magnetism. I want to go where you are, dodge a little bit, but not even all that far that then they cannot catch you later. So I just am not enthusiastic about 13 levels, because I don't know that you'll use them for reals, and just the logistics that come with having to organize all of these stands. So the rant there. The general idea remains the same. That is, the aircraft will move, players alternate activating aircraft. Aircraft have stats, again, that indicate, among other things, also the speed, which is the basic speed that will be modified by the roll of a blue die. And there are 4 different blue dice, from dark blue to the lightest blue. And it's cool because you can choose which one you want to use to modify your speed. So I'm playing with a Superfly Spitfire, and I want to go fast, so I'm going to use this die, which gives me the highest modifiers, or I want to slow down a lot, so I'll use this one instead. So it's always your base speed randomly modified by the roll of a die, but you can choose which die. And I like that because you can fine-tune your movement quite a bit while still having an element of randomness that that makes it interesting and exciting, and very good in particular if you're playing the game solitaire, controlling both sides to the best of your possibilities, which is how I play it, how I played. I messed around with this demo edition, and in general how I play many of my war games. So I like this idea a lot. You can also spend a burst, go full throttle, and add the die to your total, again, to modify your speed. Because of this, sometimes you will have aircraft that go really fast, and because of that, to take care of how the speed affects your ability to turn, then you have this this reference here that tells you if you're going at 8 or lower, then you can keep turning. As long as you're turning in the same direction, you can do consecutive turns. If your speed after all modifiers is between 9 and 12, then you have at least 1 straight step in between turns, and 13 or higher, then simply your turns become much wider, and so you have that. To follow that rule, 13 or higher, then you need to have at least 2 straight steps in between. It's another simple and effective way of simulating physics. Major difference here, major difference in combat. Combat is 2 steps. To resolve combat, the first step is what used to be this step in the other game. But here it's only used to resolve, to determine whether or not your bullets made contact with the enemy. And then you take a second roll, like you have in other games that have this like 2-step process. You determine what the bullets made in contact actually did, if any. So, like in the basic game, you're gonna use one of these 2 columns based on the angle. If you are straight behind your enemy, you use column 8. If you're behind your enemy, but at column A, I mean, if you're at an angle behind your enemy, column B. Modifiers apply based on distance and angle. But ultimately, when all is said and done, you determine the column, you determine the modifiers, you roll a 6-sided die, and after applying modifiers, you see if it's a hit or if it was missed. If it's a hit, then you roll 2 dice and you determine what actually happened, whether that is damage or so on and so forth. Another thing is that another major difference is that some aircraft here have endurance, which means that they can take 2 different damages before they're destroyed, and that makes them sturdier than you had in the previous game. You also have a couple of other things that I see in the box, and they're described in the document that was sent to me, but I couldn't play them because there are no scenarios yet, such as in some scenarios you have different aircraft that belong to the same side, but they can stay in the air for different amounts of time, because some took off more recently, some are coming from afar, so you'll have fuel to keep track of how many turns different formations can stay in the air. So this is the general idea. I really like the first edition a lot. Because it was just a very fun game, intuitive, simple. It gave me that sense of dogfighting, of a tight, fun action that seems to be respectful of history and physics, and still gave me a lot of tactical options. The two major differences in this game, one I like in this edition, one excites me and one not so much. The multiplication of the levels, I don't know what it'll really bring to the table. I'm simply very skeptical about it, because even when I made up my mini confrontation, I just didn't have enough stands to do it. And if I had so many stands, then I had to deal with keeping a lot more of these clean and organized, because again, this is not enough, and when I set them up on the table, that was already annoying. But then I really like some of the new rules, and I really like the two-step combat system and the endurance, because again, it has more tactical a sense of tactical sophistication, but in particular, it adds a sense of narrative, more effects, more things that can go wrong, more haha and exciting moments. So between pluses and minuses, this is my overview of Age of Dogfight World War II, again, based on a pretty early demo edition, and so I don't make any claims that I know the game, but I have just shared my very early, very personal opinions here, and I hope you enjoyed it.